Could we please have on stage David Abraham, Chief Executive of Channel 4, and David Lynn, President of Channel 5, and a Viacom company. Welcome both.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Hi, David. Two Davids. Okay. I don't know who's the incumbent and who's the sort of challenger here. You've both been around a little while, but why don't you start, Dave? Because Channel 4 seems to me to have a brand of some kind. I'm not quite sure I understand exactly what it stands for, but I think it stands for something a little bit funky, a little bit different, and that was its heritage. And you've made a number of other, pioneering video on demand services, for example, in the UK. Is there a culture at Channel 4 that you think drives all that?
Well, Channel 4 is a very unique hybrid because it's publicly owned but entirely commercially funded, and it was created about 35 years ago by the government to stimulate the creative industries of the UK, and it's still doing that, working with hundreds of companies up and down the land. And we operate to a very clear government remit. Earlier we saw Gary Gibbon asking a question to the Prime Minister, and Channel 4 News is an example of something that we do that requires a subsidy from the more commercial parts of our schedule that deliver surpluses that pay for the things that are in the public remit. So all of that feeds into the culture of the organisation. You're absolutely right. And we're about 800 people in London with some staff up and down the country engaging with the production sector. And our staff do care about delivering public service broadcasting of high quality, particularly that can appeal to a slightly younger audience. So we're really interested in using creative innovation in the forms of television to bring subjects to the public's attention, and I suppose to engage civic engagement with that. Well, one of our hit shows right now is Gogglebox. I mean, Gogglebox is a really fun show, but actually through the centre of it is a wonderful opportunity to actually talk about what's going on in the world this week and get the public's reaction. My understanding is that senior politicians tend to watch it as the best focus group they could possibly have to getting the pulse of the nation. We also invest in British independent film, for example, which is a very economically challenging area, but one where we have been investing in top directors from this country for over 30 years. So Steve McQueen, for example, is a really good example of someone who developed their career with us and has achieved international fame. So the way in which we can take these creative risks as effectively a not-for-profit organisation, helping to develop this IP that can then quite often travel around the world. And with a sort of post-Brexit creative economy, we feel we have a very strong role to play in supporting those creative entrepreneurs in our sector.
David, I'll use an example of my kids again. They don't watch television at the time that it's broadcast. They'll watch it on demand, they'll watch it on their laptop, not on their TV. Is it tough? Isn't it? So the 30-second commercial, if you like, probably lost some of its power. Is it a tough time to be a TV channel? And how has that changed? And how's life changed?
Well, actually, 90% of the viewing is still linked with the scheduled TV channel.
Is it really 90%?
Absolutely, and that makes the point that while disruption is happening, you really have to judge the pace of that disruption because your existing core business is still incredibly important. So I've been in this role for 10 years now. When I took on the role, people were talking about digital disruption. We're still talking about it 10 years later, which isn't to say that it hasn't happened. It absolutely has. But I think it's like the old adage that technology change tends to be overestimated in the short term and underestimated in the long term. So over those 10 years, there's no doubt, your kids are very typical. People are choosing to watch the content they want, when they want to watch it and where they want to watch it. So we've had to make our content available in on-demand services and on mobile devices to be able to facilitate that. But at the same time, we've also invested in our core business, and the core business has actually quadrupled. Our viewing has quadrupled in the last 10 years, and the revenues have grown 3 times, both through acquisition and through organic. So it's that balance of following where the audience is and moving at the right pace.
So that's interesting. So you're saying that, don't get carried away, throw the baby of your core audience out with the bathwater of disruption.
Absolutely. You need to be progressive enough that you are investing in new services, and we spend a lot of time investing in new services. We've made all our content available across video on demand services, whether that's on with our partners or through our own apps. But equally, we've increased, take Channel 5 for instance, we've increased our investment in Channel 5 content by 20% over the last 2 years, and Channel 5 has just had its most successful year. We've just announced that, both in terms of ratings and financials.
And profits, yeah. What about your relationship with the viewer? It's quite, because you, I think, have been quite keen to collect data on people as well. So it's not a faceless transaction, it's not a faceless view. You've got more information, you handle that data differently.
Yeah, I mean, over the last 5 years, we've gone on a big transition to try and reset the idea of what broadcasting actually is. I mean, broadcasting traditionally is lots of masts around the country and people from one place sending out signals to millions of homes. What we set out to do was to try and create the technology and the approach that would give us that return path. And in response to that, we now have 15 million people registered directly with us as an organization, mainly through the All4 app.
And what does that give you?
Basically, it gives the consumer a more personalized experience, so they can find the archive and the live and the catch-up services that product that they want. But at the same time, it's allowed us to sell our online video at the same premium pricing as our primetime airtime. And this is a first globally. There were very few media players that have succeeded in doing this. By comparison to YouTube, for example, primetime television airtime that we sell is a much, much higher price because it's perceived to be professional, high-quality product. And so what we set out to do was to enter into the streaming video environment, but find a way to monetize that very effectively. And this is something that the newspaper industry is still trying to work out how to do. They have huge reach, the newspapers, but they are disintermediated primarily by Facebook and Google in terms of the monetization. And in our industry, I think we're doing quite a good job of protecting our direct relationship with our content.
You have Viacom Labs, Dave. What is in the lab?
Yeah, well, we're trying to foster innovation across the whole company. So Viacom Lab is a place, it's a group we've established to work with innovators both within and without of the company to develop new products and services. We have what we call a pilot and scale model. So we test different business models, different products in particular markets, and then we scale them rapidly around the world. An example of that is our Viacom Playplex, which is our suite of TV player apps. That came out of a project in Germany a few years ago that they had done some cutting edge innovation there. We said, okay, let's get behind that. We put a whole team behind it to develop it. We then made it available across all of our brands and all of our markets simultaneously. And now it's rolled out in 50 countries around the world.
Is that one of the advantages of having a giant parent company like Viacom? What are the good, the pluses and minuses of that relationship?
Well, I think we heard a bit about investment on the last panel. There's no doubt that being part of a big global company does mean that that investment is available. So, for instance, when we invested £450 million to buy Channel 5, for instance, but equally then to get behind Channel 5, having bought it, as I mentioned, we've put in 20% more into the content there. When it comes to developing new suites and services, if we develop some of our apps, whether it's the MTV or the Nickelodeon app, we are able to exploit that across all of the geographies around the world, which makes it easier to get a return on that.
Okay. Well, you want to come on that? I mean, do you find yourself constrained in that way?
Well, I think we have to have the approach of a challenger as well as an incumbent, and we do both. I mean, our central, I suppose, focus is on creative innovation, finding new ideas for TV shows that will break out, that will help us to deliver the remit in new ways, and which also will help our creative partners to build their businesses. And we are associated with successful development and growth of hundreds of companies up and down the UK in our history. In terms of the technology side, I mean, over the last 5 years, the makeup of our staff, as previous speakers have said, has changed quite a lot. Working out how we in broadcasting can attract data scientists into our employment has its own challenges. But we were very early, in actual fact, using cloud technology. We were very early in how we built our apps using open source software. And what we've found is we can attract these young millennial software employees because of the openness of how we worked. And I found some interesting connections listening to Nicola earlier around that, because what motivates young millennials to work in media and tech is to be associated with doing exciting new things in new ways. And that's as important as perhaps being able to pay top whack, which in the case of a public service broadcaster, we never can. So we've got to offer something different. And the fact that Channel 4 is, a nice and appealing place for young people to work as well.
Is the key still content? Now that's what people, all roads lead to content, is that right?
It is and it isn't. Listen, I think you've got to have strong content, strong brand and strong technology. And part of my job is to work out how to allocate resources at the right pace, as David has said, into all of those places. But without cutting-edge content, really you fall behind very quickly in this marketplace. Channel 4 spends £700 million a year on content with over 350 companies. And we're big investors. We still spend more on original non-sports news content with UK producers than Sky do. And even though there are new challengers coming in, often they are also partners of ours. So we're producing, for example, 2 or 3 shows with Netflix right now and a couple with Amazon. So people know that we're very good at commissioning. Our approach is very progressive. The way we get the best out of our suppliers is very effective. And quite often that means that we can co-produce with people who otherwise could be our direct competitors.
When you have to sort of recoup on your investment, so you'll make a show, you'll commission something, you'll get it made. When you're selling it then, are you selling it to Netflix? Because I know that the BBC's had some problems when, for example, they've got a partnership going back 20 years with a certain German broadcaster, and yet now Netflix will pay a bit more than them, and I can put it, put my new Sherlock on that platform instead, and all those old relationships are tested.
Well, look, competition is always going to be there, and we operate at sort of, I suppose, the quality creative end of the marketplace, and we will attract both the possibility of developing new partners as well as more competition. Channel 4 is in a very unique place because we don't own the rights to our shows. We're actually regulated in such a way that we empower the producer to take those rights and exploit them commercially. So in effect, our model is very generous and therefore very attractive producers, because they can, when I worked in America, I always remember that the US networks would always want to watch what was on British TV, because we tried many more ideas than was possible in a profit-maximizing environment, primarily because of the BBC and Channel 4. And so we're coming up with more new formats that can go around the world and be really, really successful.
What are the skills of the people that you need? Having someone who's very good at commissioning or a good judge of what should be on telly is one skill. Are there other skills that you need in your industry now that are changing? You talked a little bit about sort of IT professionals. What are the new skills you need in the TV business?
Well, I think we've gone on a journey, I'd say, over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, we probably had a centralized digital department. 5 or 6 years ago, we realized actually everything needs to be digital. So we went on a process of hiring digital champions embedded in every single part of the company, and that's to drive excellence. But with the new employees, but also you need to educate your existing staff to make that transition as well. And then from there, though, as well, it's a bit like the pilot and scale model I mentioned earlier. Once we have centers of excellence in particular areas in one part of the company, we'll then use that in other parts. An example would be, we got behind Snapchat as a platform very early on. We used it as, we were one of the first advertisers on Snapchat in the UK. As a result of that, we were one of the first people to launch a Discover feed on Snapchat. Our UK team has been really leading in that area. We now use that team to share that excellence around the rest of Viacom internationally.
Here's my question about disruption, because everyone bandies it around. If everything is being disrupted all the time, what's the point of having a plan at all?
This is quite a philosophical question, but it's early in the day. Well, look,
does it make long-term planning difficult? Let's put it.
Of course, and they say that in a sense, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think there are some absolute truths for strong organisations that succeed for decades. And I would very much like to think that Channel 4 will continue to be an example of that, because there are core principles of what attracts employees and leadership to the organization to work in a particular way. And then you can use that philosophy to solve a whole variety of different problems as they occur. I mean, when we were launched 35 years ago, we were one analog channel. Now we're a portfolio of channels and services operating on over 20 platforms. The technology involved in doing that is profoundly more challenging, but at the heart of what we're doing is still enlightening, entertaining, and challenging the viewer, and coming up with programming that hopefully will be different to what the rest of the marketplace offers. And as long as we've got talented people attracted to that ideal, we will continue to be very competitive.
David, do you want to have take on that one?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you need to have some beliefs. You need to set out where you think the world is growing. Now, you need to adapt and change. You can't stick with that. But you have to say where you think the world is going to be in 3 years' time, and then you've got to make investments to back that. As I say, you've got to be flexible after that. But we regularly, every year, we go through a 3-year planning process, and we say, okay, here's where we're going to invest over the next 3 years.
And just, obviously, you were acquired by Sumner Redstone, who is in a bitter battle. Is the future of the company, its future as a Viacom company is pretty solid?
Absolutely, we're focused on the future, and internationally, we've just had our best year ever, and as I mentioned with Channel 5, this has been the best record year for Channel 5 also.
And I think I understand the Channel 4 brand. In a word, what is the Channel 5 brand? What does it mean?
It's for people with a emotional spirit. It's a broad-based entertainment channel with emotional spirit.
Okay, well, on that spirited note, thank you very much indeed. Both Davids.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now,